I think with Ayuso, they're going to know how to nurture him. Now, to the point that you just made a second ago, he burnt that bridge to the ground. And I know that he's a young kid, but if I were to give him a little advice, like, you can think whatever you want or say things to your inner circle, but when you're talking to the media, what you have to do is just say, like, I very much enjoyed my time at UAE. They gave me my first opportunity. I had a lot of success there. I wish them well. Good luck in the future. I look forward to competing. Give a PC political answer, man. Like, you never know. You know, cycling is a small world. You never know when you're going to have to, ask someone for a favor.
Like you mentioned, I think that was one of the best points thus far is how much longer the average contract is for a marquee rider. And we're talking not when they're 25, like when they're 18 or 19 years old. They're getting signed 5 or so, they're getting locked in. And whether it's good for the team or good for the rider and try to make everyone happy, a lot of times there's not going to be everyone's going to be happy. Welcome back to Beyond the Podium. I'm Christian Vande. I'll be joined by Tejay van Garderen in a split second, but it is November. There's not much racing, if at all, going on right now. And so we're talking about the transfer market. A lot of big names been moving around, maybe more than ever. The biggest, most likely, talking about Ayuso, Remco Evenepoel, who also had contracts going on forward into 26. We're now in different teams. But with that said, we have much to talk about with who is moving where, who is not signed yet. But I'd like to bring in Tejay van Garderen. Tejay, good to see you, my friend. Haven't seen you in a long time. How you been?
I've been good, man. It's good to see you too. Yeah, you're right. There's no bike racing going on, but there is plenty of football doing. How are your Bears doing? Because I'm loving where my Broncos are right now.
We won. I mean, we tried to lose yesterday. We tried as hard as we could to lose against Cincinnati, and we won there at the end. If you have not seen it, TJ, go look it up. I know you're in Mallorca right now. It's a little bit hard to follow the football, but it was spectacular. And then last week we should have never lost, and we lost. So I mean, it's a lot of fun watching the NFL right now. I can't say that I have been following that much just because I've broken too many remote controls thrown at my television against me with watching the Bears. But yeah, the Donkeys are doing fantastic. We have a winning record with the Bears. Caleb's doing great so far. He has some misses, but it's been fun to watch, man, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I actually got to watch the show live because they played an early game, my Broncos, and they were playing the Texans. So, of course, I was texting Lawson Craddock all evening last night, just hammering him, heckling him. And luckily, my Broncos pulled it out because the Texans, I mean, they're trash. We can admit that. But no, it's been good to actually just get them cycling and actually see some American stick and ball sports. But we definitely got some cycling to talk about today.
No, my friend, I did a lot of research on, the way, we have a different back, obviously, talking about the stick and ball sports and what we're accustomed to and what we read in the newspapers or what I used to read in the newspapers and what we see on television, especially with the transfer market and the way that we've done it in the past with cycling. And I really I pay attention on this corner of my eye, but I don't pay attention as much as I did while I was riding. You're still in the thick of it, Tejay, as a director. These are the riders that you'll be looking over going into the 26th season, as you have in the last couple of years. It was very rare to ever see, and still is quite rare to see any riders leaving a team in the middle of the season. A lot of it, that's why we're bringing up here today. A lot of riders are unsigned today. In the marquee rides, I think the biggest change the biggest similarity that we have with cycling now versus even 5 years ago is the emphasis putting on younger talent, taking massive risks, like we're talking about with Ayuso, we will talk about with Ayuso, on the future. Because if you don't do that, then you're always going to play the coulda, woulda, shoulda game. If you would have signed him back in the day or last year or the year before, and what we could have molded this talent in, and how are we going to fight in the post Tadej Pogačar era. And I think that's what Ayuso and Lidl-Trek are definitely looking into. But, starting off with the way it was, in the dark ages when I was still riding, TJ, yourself even, versus today, and the money being spent buying riders out of contracts that still have many years to go in Ayuso, Evenepoel. There's been quite a few in the last couple of years. It's becoming a lot more common with these marquee riders being much more demand.
Yeah. Well, Christian, I think you wouldn't be surprised to learn that not a whole lot's changed since you left because cycling does move at a very slow pace, not like, our capitalist American stick and ball sports do. But a few things have changed. Like it used to be pretty rare that a rider would actually be able to break a contract because you have to get so many different parties to agree. And it's a lot different than the way it would be in an American sport because the rider owns the rights to the player. In cycling, cyclists have much more autonomy over where they want to go. So, managers could be talking to other managers and they could agree on a price. Like say you could have a really good rider, but maybe he's just a little bit too expensive. The rider wants to get him, or the team wants to get him off the books because he's just costing too much. And another team is like, you know what? I need the points that this rider can bring to the team. And sometimes one team would want to just pay half the salary to get him off the books, and then the other team would make up the rest of the salary. But the only contingency is the rider has to agree to want to go there. Obviously, you've ridden for a bunch of different teams. You've ridden for an American team. You've ridden for a Spanish team. You've ridden for a Danish team. Obviously, American teams are going to be a lot more attractive to you than maybe having to learn another language, assimilate to another culture. So the riders definitely have the decision, like, do I want to go to another team where they might speak another language and I have to live somewhere else? Like they actually have that choice. Whereas in baseball, if Shohei Ohtani gets traded to Tampa, it's like, hey, pack your bags, bro. But yeah, you are going to see more and more that riders are traded because it happened with our team last year with Bettiol. He moved to Astana halfway through the year, and it was a deal that all sides were happy with. He was happy to go there. It's largely Italian speaking there, even though it's a Kazakhstan team. We were happy to move a spot off of our roster to free up a spot for next year. And even though Bettiol, it was a great asset to us for many years, and I was sad to see him go personally. It was, if all the sides agree, then that's going to happen. And we're, I think, going to start to see that more and more in cycling.
But to your point, it has to be the perfect trifecta. All the teams, everyone has to be in alignment. It can't be just like you mentioned with Otani saying see you in Florida next year. That's just the difference. Do you think that this is the future, which you're alluding to? Do you think it's going to start going that? And do you think it would be a positive if we do end up in a scenario where the riders don't have as much choice of where they are, but there could be better upside as well in the future?
I don't think necessarily that riders are not going to have the choice. But yeah, it's never going to be like a transfer market opens and you're just going to see players switching teams and the entire rosters are different the way you might see in the NBA. But you are going to start to see this trend happen more and more often. And it's easy to get the rider to agree to it if you tack on a few more zeros behind that number, like what we saw with Remco Evenepoel. Like he was locked into a pretty long-term contract there with Quickstep and reluctant to let him go, as they should be, because he was their bread and butter on that team. And it's going to be curious to see what direction Quickstep goes in next year. They're going to probably switch to more a sprinter classic squad like we've seen them in the past. But, it's going to be easy to get the rider to agree to something if they get more money, and they also maybe are going to a team with the vision of, we want to showcase this rider. But sometimes the other team has to be compensated. It's basically about who is this working better for, and what do they want in exchange for that? I mean, Bora, they paid massive amounts of money for Remco Evenepoel. But don't think that Quickstep, it's not like a Bettiol situation there where maybe another team is paying for part of their salary to get them off the books. Bora's, they had to pay Quickstep an exorbitant amount of money, kind of similar to what happened with Bradley Wiggins and Garmin. I think you were a part of the squad back then when he just got fourth place in the Tour. Team Sky wanted him.
I think or not anymore, but up until just a couple of years ago, you were still in the bus that we always said that Bradley paid for, because we didn't have the amount of cash. So once in a while, it can be a positive boon for a team, smaller team, that we had with Garmin Sharp at that point in time. It's never nice, obviously. You want to fight for the rider, especially if you're talented as Bradley was, and enigmatic as he was. But at the same time, like you mentioned with Quickstep, they don't have the biggest budget, and so having a big surplus of cash coming, obviously they're going to miss Remco big time, and those points that he brings to the team, and all the the pictures and images that are being put forth with Olympic champion. But bring this up real quick. The only thing that I see that's going to change is I see so many young riders, juniors in fact, being signed at a young age, and I don't know about the law of minors, and that's the only thing I don't know about going. So when you're being signed when you're under 18, especially in European Union, what that entails. But there's a lot of speculative signing right now with younger and younger and younger riders. With Bora, with Visma, then they have the junior team, then they have the under 23 team, which is more or less a farm team going up into the pros, and then sign those long-term contracts. So if the smaller teams, and I know that like Decathlon is one of those teams that they sign pretty astute and hardcore contracts early on. Do you see that as a difference? And that's the difference makers that these guys use to start exchanging riders and almost using it like the portal in college football, a little bit like that. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of with the young riders, because not everyone's going to pan out, but you have to take the risk on some of these riders, and you have to snatch them. You have to hold on to them, especially like the American team like EF. You have the great riders. You're like, well, I want these guys. You want to be able to fly the flag. Do you think that could be the a little bit of a change? I mean, Ayuso's not so much older. I mean, he's still a baby if you really think about it. How young he was when he was podium as a 19-year-old or 20-year-old, I believe, went on the Vuelta. So anyway, that's the only way I could think of what's going to change in the near future with the younger riders being signed. A lot we saw with football or soccer, European football. What about that, TJ? Do you see some of this changing?
Yeah, I actually hope that changes, because I don't think that riders are ready to just come from the juniors into the pros. Like, I know it worked with Remco Evenepoel, and it's worked with maybe a couple other riders. No one else comes to mind straight away. Well, I guess Quinn Simmons. But Quinn Simmons also had a little bit of a struggle for a couple of seasons. Even though he had some good performances, he also, I don't think he would have been served well for staying a couple of years in the amateur ranks. And, we saw this a lot also in the NBA. There were guys going straight out of high school, just kind of foregoing the college years. MJ did 3 years in college, and I think that served him well going into the pros. But then you also started seeing in the NBA that a lot of guys, they would enroll themselves for the draft straight out of high school and then just not even apply for college, assuming they were going to go into the NBA, and they didn't get selected, and they were just left with nothing. And also some guys, they just didn't pan out, like you said. And
yeah.
I do want to see like maybe a minimum requirement. I don't know if it's a one or done sort of thing, that you have to spend at least 1, maybe 2 years in what we call the espoir category. I don't know. Maybe you speak French better than me. You can say what that means. I think it means development or future.
Yeah.
No.
Kids.
Yeah, they call it the espoir category. It's 19 to 22 years old. And it's basically 4 years where you do races like an under 23 world championships. You do the Tour de l'Avenir. You do the Nations Cup races. And you can still race in some like 1.1 or 2.1 level races, but you need that sort of schooling to be ready to go into the pros. And yeah, another thing that you mentioned, Christian, is how long these contracts are getting. That's a lot different than how it used to be. I remember one time in my career, I signed a 3-year contract, and a lot of people were like looking at me completely wide-eyed, like, you're going to commit to that long? And 3-year contracts nowadays are nothing. People are signing like 5-6 year deals, especially these young kids. And I'm like, I know that they're kind of able to finagle or break the contract, and the way Remco did, but that comes with a lot of lawyers and a lot of like headache. And I would just think like we need to shorten these things up, give the riders a bit more freedom, but also give the teams even a little bit more freedom to be like, if you're stuck with this guy on your books and maybe he's not panning out, you also have to have the freedom to move on. But also the rider, if he outperforms whatever contract he's been given, needs to have the freedom to move somewhere and actually negotiate for more.
Well, it's a risk on both sides, right? And I think that's why a lot of times when you have a future and it's just like buying a stock, right? You have this guy, you're hoping that in a couple of years' time he's going to be racing. And you're right. A lot of times there's riders who are way behind on their contract.
But you watched The Last Dance. You remember the whole Scottie Pippen story. I feel like that's happening a lot in cycling right now.
Jerry Krause, man. I mean, I lived it. You know,
ruthless.
We all hated Jerry Krause. And then after I watched The Last Dance, I'm like, oh, I cut him a little bit more slack, you know. But
that deal won you 3 of those championships, probably all 6. I don't know.
100%. So I think you brought up the best point, though. I think the length of the contracts has definitely changed, and that's why we're in these situations much more often. You know, Ayuso is one of those guys. He got locked into that and didn't like the situation he was in. Remco Evenepoel, for different reasons, he doesn't like the situation because he was being underpaid, and so we get a place. They get paid at Quick Step. He gets paid more of it. Everyone kind of wins, apart from, you know, obviously the cash going out the door. All right.
Time will tell who wins. I mean, if Juan Ayuso goes to actually start challenging Tadej Pogacar, I don't know. The UAE, they might be like, "Ooh, what did we let go?" But time's always going to tell with these deals.
Geniuses. Yeah, I agree.
And honestly, like that whole point of, you know, you don't draft for need, you draft the best player. This whole Remco Evenepoel thing, I'm like, if I were Quickstep, I'd be like, I don't care if you're unhappy. I don't care if you're going to kick or scream. I'm not getting rid of you. You know, like the loser is always going to be how he performs on the other team, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, let's turn this page. I feel like we could talk about this until the cows come in.
Yeah, we could.
So we have quite a few riders, though, that still officially, I'll preface this by saying that they could have signed yesterday or this morning, or maybe they signed a long time ago and the news just hasn't come out. But one of the biggest ones is on your team, my friend, Richie Carapaz. I know you probably can and cannot talk, and sometimes I think we talked a little bit before. You're the last one to find out. But first of all, do you feel like he's going to stay at EF? And do you think that this is best served that he does stay for himself and the team?
I think it would be best for both parties. Now, obviously, I don't know the price. I'm not privy to all that information. So, but I think he is an amazing champion. I think he has done great things for this squad. And I think the expectation on him is realistic. I think, you know, you go to the Giro, you fight for GC, but when you're up against Tadej Pogacar, we're going to go for stage wins and mountain jersey. And he's been able to be very, very successful and get the team a lot of publicity in that regard. So I hope he stays. I think if I were to guess, I would say he would stay, but I don't know for sure. You know, obviously, like we just said, all sides have to agree. But if I were to have a crystal ball, I would say I'd be surprised if he didn't stay.
Okay. We like to hear that. I'm a big fan of Richie, especially when he's on form. That guy, he looks effortless on the bicycle, and it's just attacking style. He's the one rider above and beyond Tadej who just does not care if he's going to get 7th place or win, and that's a scary person to go against. If you have to go against a guy like Carapaz day in and day out in a Grand Tour, where you just don't know how good he is. I mean, he could fall to pieces, or he could ride like the wind. You just don't know. I like to hear that. We got Gourmet. There's a complete debacle. TJ in Intermarché, them folding and being in the hinterlands right now. He's still only 25 years old, which I had to double check. I can't believe how young he still is. Green jersey
that actually surprises me hearing you say that.
Anyway, so that's a complete mess. Derek G trying to leave on that. That's a completely different conversation. Victor Lefebvre, okay, that's maybe understandable. For Gaviria, then we're getting into different riders, especially from the caliber and what they've done lately, and the fact that Gaviria hasn't won a Grand Tour stage since 19. He's still 31 years of age. Anyway, there's a lot of riders out here that are still in, and I think the difference between, you know, what JV used to call, Jonathan Vaughan used to call it the whole Moneyball situation. I don't think that that's as possible in the modern era of cycling, where you could take some guys who still have something left to prove. And look, I was one of those guys, but now you have teams that have all the ambition and background to bring the guys to training camps at altitude, the aerodynamics, to make sure that they could still be tuned up. But I don't think there's really too much left on the floor to have these guys who are maybe still wanting to have the second birth of their career later, like a Fernando. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm just putting that out there. I mean, that was 20 some years ago. CSC was with Bjarne Riis was one of the first guys to really start thinking and picking and choosing guys for minimum salary. Bobby Julich was a great example of that. And then winning Paris-Nice a couple of weeks later. I mean, it was incredible to watch. All they needed was some TLC and something that you're still loved, buddy. Come on, get out there and give it a shot. But I think in this day and age, TJ, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that, all the I's and T's are dotted and crossed, and with all the teams, and there's nothing left on the floor these days.
That's true. I think once riders age out, they're really on the clock, and unless you're a constant producer, you're gonna get overlooked. And it's sad, but I mean, the Moneyball situation, it's kind of happening in reverse. Like, that's why people are pushing so much towards the youth, because look, Jonathan Vaughters, to his credit, he still plays Moneyball, and he hits on a lot of these guys. Like, remember Sergio Higuita and Danny Martinez? He got them on basically minimum neo-pro salaries, and they won the Dauphiné for us. They won, Podium in Paris-Nice, stage wins of Grand Tours, and he got them for cheap. And then once they got expensive, I know there was COVID years, and we would have liked to keep them, and budget was an issue then, and we had to get rid of them. I would have loved it if they stayed. I think their careers would have been just as good, if not better, if they had stayed. But Jonathan Vaughters, he does know how to find those mega talents at a price. It's just not happening with the older riders. I mean, he tried it with me. I mean, I maybe got a result or two for him, but it didn't really pan out.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. So I guess it's the difference between like what we're calling the Moneyball. Say we're having older riders who are really a little bit, maybe let's call them washed out a little bit, or just not as good or sharp as they once were, and tuning them back up, versus straight up, scouting. Let's just call it, making sure that you're finding all the young
there
talent.
is still a place. There is still a place for older riders, but you just have to learn to reinvent yourself. I mean, like Rui Costa, he went from being a world champion and a stage hunter and a classics rider to being like a high class domestique. And I had a teammate like that with Samuel Sanchez. And I think even you kind of morphed yourself into that as well. You were one of the leaders for a Grand Tour. I think you had maybe a bit more experience in that, because I think you started out as a domestique and became a leader, and then you were able to slot easily back into that domestique role. So there is still a place, but you're not going to look for like a resurgence and like, hey, this guy who was podium in the Tour 7 years ago, maybe we can get him back to that same level. That's not going to happen. The way these riders are training, like the way that training has changed so much, you can't train one way your entire life and think that you're going to flip that switch and be like, oh, now I'll start training the way these young guys are. No, if they've been training that way for 7 years, you can't catch up.
How about we shift a little bit? And I would say one great example from last year of maybe not changing from World Tour to World Tour, but actually coming down a step and changing your program out with Tom Pidcock. There was so much talk, and actually we did one of our episodes, I believe, maybe when even you and I last year, about how that was going to go. I would say that went very well. Like incredibly well. If you think about the way they nurtured his season, smaller races, not the massive races, get some big W's behind him, a lot of confidence in himself and his team, and the team stepped up around him. They were completely different organization 1 year to the next. So the 25 season with Q365 versus what they did in 24, completely different animal, even with some of the same riders. Do you think that could be a different one, where we've seen some of these smaller teams that are trying to step up? Tudor is a great example, even though that now they did step up. Fabian Cancellara's team did a great Tour de France this year. Do you think there'll be more of this in the near future with I'm not going to call them, I'm not saying any shade whatsoever, the fantastic teams, but not at the top tier level, but just one step down, where you still have those opportunities for guys who maybe just can't make it all the time, but then get that confidence back up and then come back up.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point because it also, the visions of the team have to align. And another example that I'm thinking about in my career was with BMC. They actually started out as a small American team, and
No,
then they
that's a
grew and grew.
great example.
Yeah, they were pro Continental. So when you say that they're a smaller level team, that's not throwing shade at all. They are pro Continental, and there's like a world tour, so that's a step above. So they actually get automatic invites to all these races. Pro Continental, you have a little bit more freedom to pick your program, but you might have a smaller budget. You might not have a high caliber enough roster in order to send like split programs. It'd be impossible for Q36.5 to compete in Tirreno Adriatico and Paris-Nice. They just wouldn't have the riders to be able to split that program at that time of year. But no, 100%. Like if you give a rider a certain confidence and just, yeah, I think Tom Pidcock, he likes it being the Tom Pidcock show. And when he has his own team, like Q36.5, that is Tom Pidcock. I could try, but I can't name another rider on that team. So I think he likes it to be all about Tom Pidcock. So if he gets his own team, he's probably going to shine a lot. Whereas on Ineos, he had to share the spotlight with a few other people, and that was maybe like, you know, a little bit of a point of contention for him. But no, 100%. And the thing is with these pro continental teams, a lot of these teams are chomping at the bit to get a berth into the World Tour. And we used to see this a lot more back in your day, Christian, and my day. You see it less and less now, but this year, especially with Intermarché Wanty and Lotto Soudal merging, or no, sorry, not Lotto Soudal. It's now Soudal Quickstep. It used to be Lotto Soudal. Now it's just Lotto. Sponsors, man, they just, especially Belgian ones, they just kind of like trade back and forth. But anyways, and we're also seeing Arkea B&B. They are out now. So now you're seeing the market flooded with a bunch of high quality riders. And that makes it really, really hard for a good quality domestique. Like we're actually having to get rid of this guy, James Shaw, because, you know, we're bringing on new guys, and James Shaw is an amazing rider. And I would have loved to keep him on the roster, and he's struggling to find a team, but it's really hard to find a team for a lot of these guys when the market just gets flooded with two teams folding. And it makes maybe a spot for an Uno X or a two-door or Q365 to move up into the World Tour. And, you know, they're going to need the points to do so. But yeah, it's never fun when some teams fold.
Yeah. I hear you. Let's go back and focus on Ayuso now. Ayuso, that was easily the biggest transfer late in the season, so it's topical right now. Spent a lot of money on this guy to buy out his contract, and then of course pay him. You know, there was so much talk during the Vuelta, which Bob and I recall, and just the way he, you know, obviously the front of the house talking about Ayuso and back and forth. You know, I call him dictator. It was pretty rough. You know, there was the bridge is definitely a little bit burnt down. It's a little crispy in between himself and UAE after the Vuelta. How do you think that's going to go down? You know, obviously their outlook is going forward, and they're taking some big risks, like we've been talking about. And you have to take big risks these days, especially if you have a solid, you know, at least budget with Lidl-Trek going forward. Do you see this going in a positive light there, TJ, with Ayuso?
I do, because I have the utmost respect for the team Lidl-Trek. I think they have a good team of directors. They have a good management squad. I mean, other than UAE, which just has like ridiculous budget and they can hire the best talent, and you know, good on them. You know, I say that without shade. I say that with a tinge of jealousy, but I'm like, Lidl-Trek, they are the team that they just win with riders across the board.
Yeah.
Different styles of different styles of riders. You got Quinn Simmons, you got Jonathan Milan, you got Mads Peterson, you got Skelmosa. The only thing they were missing was somebody to Giulio Ciccone. They win with everybody on that team. I mean, that team, they just know how to focus on the rider and get the best out of him without having like maybe a big marquee. I mean, I guess you could call Mads Peterson or Jonathan Milan marquee riders, but they don't seem to have that, like, this is that mega, you know, €6 million rider, but they just win with everyone. And I think with Ayuso, they're going to know how to nurture him. Now, to the point that you just made a second ago, he burnt that bridge to the ground. And I know that he's a young kid, but if I were to give him a little advice, like, you can think whatever you want or say things to your inner circle, but when you're talking to the media, what you have to do is just say, like, I very much enjoyed my time at UAE. They gave me my first opportunity. I had a lot of success there. I wish them well. Good luck in the future. I look forward to competing. Give a PC political answer, man. Like, you never know. You know, cycling is a small world. You never know when you're going to have to, ask someone for a favor.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It was hard to watch, and more importantly, it's how he interacts with his own teammates. And with Lidl-Trek, they have that special sauce there with riders just going above and beyond. And like you mentioned, maybe not the big $68 million riders, but still very good riders. Mads Pedersen leaving it all on the line for Ciccone, and vice versa. A lot of times, vice versa. Ciccone doing everything for Mads. You saw that in the Vuelta, you saw that in the Giro, and it's really cool to watch. There's not so often where you see these guys just laying down the line, sliding into home on concrete for these guys. It's pretty good. So that's my only hesitation that I have with Ayuso. That is he going to buy in to what the fabric truly is at Lidl-Trek? And that's what it seems like. And then I believe that of course he can. I'm not saying I'm going to give obviously everything that is possible. And I believe that this is from Mads' leadership within. I think Mads Pedersen he's the one who leads by example and does this. And if there is going to be the outright leader on the team, I think that's still Mads going forward into what he has already paved with this team. So that'd be my only question that I have. I mean, I have to give him the benefit of doubt, of course.
Yeah, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but you bring up a good point. I do think it's a little bit different when you have an out and outright GC guy. A lot less is expected of them. You don't see GC guys doing sprint lead outs. Like, you're not going to see Ayuso doing that. So I think most of the time when he goes to a race and he picks his program, he's going to be the leader. However, you just brought up a good example with Tom Pidcock. I don't know if it would have been more beneficial for Juan Ayuso to go to like an Uno X or to go to a two-door the way that Tom Pidcock went to Q365. And then it's like, okay, now it's the Juan Ayuso show there. I mean, even though both of those teams have really, really good riders, like especially two-door with Michael Storer, and I know you have Johannesson on Uno X, but I think it would be Ayuso would be a clear cut above.
Honestly. I didn't even think about that, man. That's not a bad. I mean, obviously hindsight is 2020, but it's that could be maybe would have been a great alternative. You think of such a big rider like him, and the future being so bright, you can't think of anything but the highest and the biggest teams possible, right? And who has the cash to be able to pay him first and foremost. The reason I brought that up is Schelmus was not pumped when some of the things that he said when he heard about the news about Ayuso coming over. And so look at and reading that and said how he isn't maybe not excited about that, but this is what happens, I guess. And if you can't 100% perform, and I'm talking about performing in only one race, and you have to perform in the Tour de France. And if Schelmus had some bad luck, or it doesn't matter why it happened, but if you don't perform, then we're going to try to bring in somebody and take the risk on someone who can.
Yeah. I maybe missed the comments that Schelmus made. Was he not pumped because he wanted to be the out and out GC rider for Lidl-Trek, or was he not pumped because of the reputation maybe that
I believe it was that he it was quite a few weeks ago. Obviously when this all came out that he was going to Lidl-Trek. But I believe it was that he didn't know about it. And I think that he was a little bit broadsided by it.
Well, I mean,
would you go and talk to your marquee riders when you're in this kind of situation? I don't know.
Well, I will say that I was maybe a little bit less than pumped when Richie Porte joined BMC, but at the end of the day, Richie and I are great friends now, and like we got along great as teammates, and but I see like if he's kind of encroaching a little bit on his territory, but I will say Juan Ayuso, as much as I've been singing his praise for a long time, I think I was the first one on this podcast to say, like, no, even though he has a Spanish flag next to him, he is an American. Like, he's a football fan. He grew up in the States.
Yeah.
He speaks American English the way, like, he could jump on this podcast and just banter with us like the same way. I really, really like the kid, but I have seen a few things from him where it is like you said, I don't know if he's going to be that team player, and maybe that's a little bit more what Skelmos is worried about. But what I'd say to Ayuso is, you're young, you got to grow up, you got to be mature, and we're still going to root for you, but you get the right way.
Yeah, I believe the Skelmos quote was more or less along the lines of being guaranteed the kingdom, that everyone's going to be working for you. They're going to build a team around you for what you can do in the future. And, obviously, Ayuso is not going to come over to that team to be a domestique, is he, TJ? Just like Richie wasn't for you.
No, 100% not. There's one reason that Ayuso wanted to leave UAE, and that was to get out of the shadow of an Almeida and a Tejay. And he wanted to be like, you know what? I want to be seen as the best guy here. And that's what he did. And if that encroaches on Skelmos' territory a little bit, I can understand him being a little territorial there. But hey, you got to update your resume, Skelmos. If you want to be the better rider than Ayuso, don't shy away from the competition, man. Step up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it could erase both their games. Yusuf, let's not forget about him as well. He's going to have to show himself as well, and get the new teammates behind him as well. And Skelmos, apart from not having a great Tour de France, I mean, that crash he had, I was right behind my motorcycle. That was gnarly this year. It was really bad. But he's had some bad luck. I mean, but he is also the only guy who beat Tejay this year in the sprint in the Absolute Gold Race. So we have to give him that as well in the W column. And overarching with Lidl-Trek, I believe that both of us are fans of what Luca does over there with Lidl-Trek, what they have done over the last couple of years, that massive injection of cash with Lidl-Trek and what they've done with that and form the team. But yeah, we always have to talk about, right? I mean, because this is a big risk when you're paying this kind of money, and there's always going to be some kind of speculation. But, I believe that these teams have to be taking these risks now more than ever. And they'll continue to do this. This is going to be talking points in the future. I mean, this is going to be more and more so. Like you mentioned, I think that was one of the best points thus far, is how much longer the average contract is for a marquee rider. And we're talking not when they're 25, like when they're 18 or 19 years old. They're getting signed 5 or so. They're getting locked in. And whether it's good for the team or good for the rider and try to make everyone happy, there's a lot of times there's not going to be everyone's going to be happy. And I think with the younger riders being signed, talking teenagers and the juniors on long-term contracts, which is happening often, I think this could be interesting to watch in the future. We're going to have no shortage of drama. Let's just put it that way going forward, I believe.
No, we're all here for the drama. That's what makes it exciting. I mean, come on. Not everyone has to be kumbaya and all be friends. Like, let's get to that nitty gritty. I mean, we love to see it.
TJ, okay, we're going 100% speculation now. Like, a couple of years from now, Tejay's just completely over the Tour de France, which he's almost seemed like this year. And he's not doing it anymore. He's won a couple more tours. He's got in the bag that's going to go and cherry pick different races. What team and what riders are going to be able to take the crown going forward?
Who is the rider that is going to be like the heir apparent to Tadej Pogacar? That's what you're going to say. Okay. Man. Wow. It's probably a rider that we haven't even heard of yet, because I had just had this conversation with Bob Roll last week, and I was saying, Tadej answered a lot of questions for me this year, because he had gotten beaten by Jonas for 2 years in a row, and we were thinking, okay, I was saying Tadej's the better all-around rider, but Jonas Vingegaard is probably the better 3-week racer. And so if you take a more quintessential 3-week racer, he's going to be better than Tadej. And I don't think that 2024 really counted, because Jonas had that horrendous crash in the Tour of Pays Basque and didn't have any preparation. He showed up basically off the couch.
TJ, I'm going to give you a little hint. He's North American. He's on Tadej's team. Mexico's North America.
Okay, you're going Isaac Del Toro.
Yeah, I
Isaac Del
mean,
Toro, he's
but how quickly? But to your point, how quickly on the scene to become what he is? You could be 100% correct. It's only been what 18 months since we've seen Isaac Del Toro become an amazing talent, and so it's very possible that the next Isaac Del Toro is still in the wings right now, and we haven't just seen him yet. I mean, Sexas is another guy, the Frenchman. He's an incredible bike rider. So there's a lot, but I think that Isaac Del Toro for sure could be there. But I like your point that it's happening quicker and quicker. We're not seeing talent needing 5-6 years to mature into something incredible. You're seeing it
mm.
at that, and that's why the emphasis is being put on these youngsters so much these days. And I get it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. Isaac Del Toro, that's not a bad bet. He's so young, and he seems just like genuinely happy and joyful when he's racing. And that's what I like to see. And I think that's going to be
Yeah,
more of a testament to what level are you going to reach? Because, when you look at Remco Evenepoel, as much as I'm a fan of his, kicking the water bottles and stuff, it's like, you can just sense that he's under this like pressure cooker. Like when he won the Vuelta that one year, he just looked like he couldn't get to the end quick enough. Whereas like these guys on UAE with Del Toro, Tade, they look like they have the joy in bike racing. And I know that we were seeing a little bit of a, waning motivation from Tade at the end of the Tour de France, but everyone's saying that that's going to be the reason why he's going to retire soon. He's getting tired of this, but I disagree. I think it was because he was missing João Almeida. Almeida wasn't able to steamroll all those breakaways on the mountains, and Tade was getting sick of not being able to win. I think if he would have won 8 stages in the Tour de France, he would have been just like smiling and jovial the way he normally was.
yeah.
But he was like, this stinks. Everyone's kind of riding my wheel. I don't have my left-hand lieutenant to just mow these things down so that I can win more. And I don't like losing. I think that's what was going through Tade's mind.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of both. I think there was a lot of times he was stuck in a catch-22 situation where he's you know, being yelled at, and you said it yourself, late early last year about just the greedy part about it. So he's being yelled at for being greedy for going stage wins, and then he's being yelled at for not going for the win and going for the jugular every day. So he's just like, just get me out of here. I just want to win this race and leave. And so I think he was just caught in that no man's land of, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to go and crush everyone every day, or do you want me to let other people win the race? That was my feeling.
It's more nuanced than that, Christian. You know that. We don't have to get back into that conversation again. I know I was beating the drum. Yeah, Tade this, Tade that. But like, there's always a difference. There, you can always tell the difference. It's hard to explain, but I still think that about Tade sometimes. I still think about like, okay, the guy is 30 minutes down. There's no threat to you up there. Why are you doing this? But there are certain circumstances where it's like, okay, yeah, go get yours, man. Like, no, don't hold back. And you know the difference. So yeah, thanks for opening up old wounds, Christian. You tend to do that.
I know. Hey, look, I cut you some slack. You got to sit in the car. You're in the pink Cadillac every day and just watching him just steamroll everybody. So sometimes it's got to be frustrating. But back to the point of who's going to be there. I believe there's so much more talent. There's talent being pulled from every which direction from all over the world these days. I mean, Mexico being the last time I've seen someone who could ride that was Raul Alcala when I was a kid, and all the way to Isaac Del Toro is just amazing to see. And the people in Mexico watching him, I don't know if you watched the nationals or saw any of the clips from the national championships in Mexico a couple weeks ago, was amazing.
No.
TJ. Okay, it was close to his hometown, and it was he was out there. I don't know if he used both legs to kill everybody, but he's such an amazing talent. I believe that there's going to continue to take over. Just a couple of years ago, we were thinking, more than a couple of years ago, but when Egan Bernal was on top of his form, we were thinking this guy is he's going to win 5 more in a row. There's no one's going to be able to touch him. And then, of course, we have next year and the next iteration of who is the best. Obviously, this is a long stretch now with Tade, maybe one of the longer stretches we've seen in a very long time, and watching, in my opinion, the best cyclist of all time. So who is going to be able to take that throne? And I don't hate your theory that we don't see him yet. I really don't, just because of case in point. Isaac Del Toro, if you just said this, 18 months ago, yeah, we saw him do a couple of things and some other races, Tour Down Under, I believe. And then what he did in the second half of the season was unreal, man.
Yeah, and to be honest, nobody expected this from Tadej Pogacar. So Isaac Del Toro has had a better start to his career than Tadej Pogacar has. When I remember racing against Tadej Pogacar, I saw him get like 5th in the Dauphiné, and he was like 3rd in the Vuelta and kind of struggling a little bit behind. Struggling. I mean, he was so young, so you can't call that struggling. But it wasn't until that 2020 Tour de France that he kind of he pulled off the heist of the century. Nobody expected him to win on that Planche de Belfi time trial. And it's just like, as soon as he did that, it was like, okay, he's off to the races. Like there's no slowing this guy down. So if you're going to say like who actually had the better, opening to their season, Del Toro is actually, you compare those first years, he's better than Tadej was.
That's terrifying. That's terrifying to talk about. Well, I like this, DJ. Thank you very much for this conversation. I think there's a lot to be talked about. I mean, we didn't even get into how long everyone's careers are going to be. That's been a topical conversation we've had for a while now. Last couple of years, there's been more emphasis on younger riders and how hard they're going, even as juniors. We could go on and on about all these conversations, but it is November. We're going deep. It is definitely transfer season. There's still a lot of unsigned riders out there. One of the biggest ones is on your team. So hopefully for your sake, you will have Richie Carapaz in pink going forward. And nonetheless, great to talk to you, my friend.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Christian. I hope the Bears can get a few more W's, but I'm sitting real good right now with my Broncos.
Super Bowl, baby. Super Bowl. We'll see you there.
Let's see you there.
See you, bud.
For all your cycling content year-round, subscribe to NBC Sports YouTube page. We got it all.